Having a weird hair day.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker, and this is WPwatercooler. This is episode number 227, and today's topic is it Steve's Weird Hair Day? Is that what it was? Oh, no, no. It's actually...
I don't know what's going on over here.
It's the WordPress Plugin Directory. We're going to talk about WordPress Plugin Directory in just a minute. Before we do that, let's get everyone introduced. Aaron, it's your turn. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Jason. I'm the Director of Web Engineering at Zeek. I work with the lovely Steve and Sarah. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, you survived this long. Good job.
I'm not sure.
If you can believe.
Not sure I've ever been described as lovely, but go on.
Andy, how about you?
I'm a surgeon in Palm Springs, California, and for fun, I do plugin development.
Nice. Good to have you on. How about you, Brian?
Yes, Brian Hogg, help run all the WordPress stuff in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And I have 3 plugins in the repo right now, soon to be a 4th. As soon as I stop putting malicious code in there, they keep catching it. It's really annoying.
Man, basics before, dude. You know, you got to watch out for that. How about you, Sarah?
Rules.
Hi, I'm Sarah Weefald. I'm the production manager / product manager / whatever at Zeek Interactive. And I can't wait for WordCamp San Diego this weekend.
Woo!
Nice.
All right.
How about you, Steve?
I am Steve Zanget. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I lead the OC WordPress meetup, which will be held this Monday at our office in Huntington Beach.
Awesome. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter, and my blog is jasontucker.blog. That's about it. So, folks, let's talk a little bit about the WordPress plugin directory. Man, this thing's evolved over time, and it had a major revision just recently. What have you seen about that particular, that version of the WordPress repo that's come out now? Now we're calling it the directory, huh?
Well, the first thing I noticed is the home page of the directory now looks how it looks when you're looking at, say, add a new plugin inside of the WordPress dashboard. So that's consistent. So everything's in those grid boxes, the 2-column boxes, which makes for a nice layout.
Well, it's still not the default. That new one is still not the default. You still have to go and click on a link on the top there. It says test out our plugin directory, and then you get to see that plugin directory.
Oh,
yeah,
is it because I clicked on the? There's an even newer one than what I was seeing. So thank you, Jason.
Yep.
I'm looking at it right now, and it's very clean, but I find a lot of those links that they had before on the side. Oh, okay, never mind.
We're looking at it, we're like,
Everything's still all there. It's just in very different places. So it's going to take some time for those of us who have been used to looking on the plugin directory to find everything again.
I mean, the look and feel is really nice. My biggest issue, especially with having the plugins there, is that the reviews are in full, kind of right up front. And even if you have like 1,000 good reviews, the last one that's there gets shown in full. So I really see that could be a potential issue with the new one that isn't live yet. But yeah, that's something I've submitted as feedback.
I just did a search. So the first thing I see in the plugin directory is a search box. I did a search for cache. And I'm just saying,
you just want to make more cache. So.
Yeah, no, CACHE.
Oh, cache money.
Not the kind that rules everything around me. But I'm not seeing what you're talking about. The latest review.
Yeah. So if you go to a plugin and then you click on tell us what you think link at the top, you'll see.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, you'll see that. So yeah, it just shows, it cuts out the description.
Under the review section, right? It shows the latest review. Got it.
That would be helpful if it wasn't just the latest, but the most helpful. So similar to Amazon, like, was this review helpful or not? Show the most helpful reviews to people, but that would require implementing a new functionality.
Yeah, it might be helpful if they had like an upvote, downvote type of thing, like Reddit.
Exactly.
So does that mean that at some point here we'll start getting people that will receive plugins in the mail, and then they'll use the plugin at their house, and then they'll write about it, and then they'll have to say that this was a paid endorsement of the product or something like that?
Paid endorsement, but it didn't influence how I felt about it.
Like an A+,
we'll buy again. So just looking at at some of these, like for instance, I'm looking at one called WP Fastest Cache because Steve was talking about all the cache around him, and so I was like, well, look, there's a nice header graphic now. There's an image next to the person's name and that. There's a download link over on the right hand side. You get descriptions. You get all the metadata regarding that particular plugin. Its downloads, its ratings, the support links. How many support things are there in the last 2 months, and then you get like this big old FAQ thing with reviews. So I mean, it seems like you have all this stuff on here. The thing about the WordPress repo I never really understood is that it's not the default place that I go look at for a plugin. Like I go load up whatever website I'm going to be doing something on, and then do a search for the plugin, and then I'm going to see it within my WordPress interface, and then I'm going to download it and install it.
You're not suggesting to our audience that they go do a Google search for a WordPress plugin.
Although I do the Google search because sometimes you get into the plugin directory and it's completely overwhelming. Right. So and it doesn't have everything in it. So if you just do like a best plugin for whatever it is I'm trying to do.
Just don't include the word free in your Google search because that will include all the plugins that have malware in them.
Yes. Just say reviews. Reviews is a good one because then you'll get a nice review.
But unless you're looking for that's the best free plugins from a reputable source.
And that's the one thing that you can rely on in the WordPress plugin directory is they've all been vetted by the WordPress team. Right?
Initially, like I literally have found 2 this week that have they're calling home, they're like sending all the data as soon as they're installed. So,
but in general,
did you do the right thing and send an email to plugins at WordPress.org?
Yes. In general, they're vetted and they're more trustworthy than doing a search for free WordPress plugin to do X, right? Because if there's something that's just floating out there that's not in the WordPress directory, you're asking for trouble. That's the point I'm making for our audience that has no experience.
So you shouldn't search for that cache plugin outside of the .org?
No, you should you should get.
I just say something to cache me outside joke.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say
online with WordPress.
We were talking about, so right now I'm looking at the plugin page for WP Supercache, right? And so one thing I always talk about in our meetup is when you are going to look for a plugin, take a look at these stats, right? These stats are important. Look at the last time it was updated. Look at the active installs. Look at how many times it's been rated, and what version of WordPress it's been tested up to. Those are critical pieces of information as to whether this is a plugin that you can rely on, right? That it speaks to the trustworthiness of the plugin. Now, it's not always accurate. I'm not making that statement, but you can, with WP Supercache, I assume that if 1+ million active installs of this plugin are in place, it's probably something that I can count on.
I would hope.
When you start getting into more specialized functions and the number of active installs start to fall, it can be a little bit more difficult to figure out what's what.
And along those lines, if you get to a plugin that has not been updated within the past 2 years, there will be an alert at the top of that plugin page to let you know this hasn't been updated recently. You might want to be careful when using this plugin.
What seems to be going on also with the new directory is that if you put a tested up to in your plugin just a 4.7, it will keep saying 4.7.1, 4.7.2, 4.7.3 without you having to change it at all. At least that's what I find. So.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that.
I see it in some of mine.
Well, one of the things that Steve and I talk about at the meetups is that there's this, you have this thing of the my favorite plugins piece where you can kind of go in there and favorite all the different plugins that you use all the time. And Steve's always like, wanting to know what are your usernames? How can we log in to look at this and how can we see it? If you go and look into if you go to wordpress.org/plugins-WP, which is the new plugin directory, and just click on any of the plugins there, the interface, like the sub nav, will show up where it says plugins and it says my favorites and a few other things that we'll get into in just a minute. If you click on my favorites, and if you're logged in, you'll actually be able to see a list of all the favorites that you've ever done. You can also include just doing a search for your name in there, and it'll be able to find all those plugins that are in there that are favorites. One of the ones that
which plugins you've done.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I noticed in here that I didn't notice the last time I looked in here is that there's a beta testing link that's in there as well. If you click on that, you can see a list of all of the plugins that are in development currently.
But back to favorites for a second. One of the tips that Jason gave me years ago, which I love, is I can actually look at the list of Jason's favorites, right? So once you favorite a list of plugins, that's public, right? So Jason can send me his list of favorites so that I can see what plugins that he uses regularly.
Yeah.
The beta testing tab has been there for a while, and I say tab because that's how it used to be. And those are what they used to call core plugins, or plugins for plugins that were in development for inclusion to core. They're still sort of that way. They just call it something different now. Feature plugins.
Yeah, the feature plugin is a little bit different than the favorites, right? So favorites is specifically to what I've favorited. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't have any hard stats on this, but apparently the search is much better in the new one as well. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of plugins that, well, I guess it's hard to say because like Sarah mentioned, right? If it's a brand new plugin, it's a niche plugin, it might not have thousands and thousands of installs, but it still might be something that's useful. But now apparently ones that have a lot more ratings and more installs will kind of naturally float up to the top more, or at least it seems to be. So that'll be a welcome change.
And even if you are dealing with a niche plugin that doesn't have lots of installs, those user reviews and the support areas are very helpful, right? You can look to see if people are having problems with it to judge the reliability before you start using it.
Yeah, definitely. I think those ratings the reviews shouldn't be in full. I don't think, at least not the latest ones. Hopefully.
Yeah, especially when there's still a problem where people leave reviews in lieu of a support request.
Yep.
Or when they're reviewing the paid version and not the version that they can actually download from the repo. Directory. Sorry.
And so let's be clear here. Not all plugin developers are created equally, right? So that's important. That's what when I'm evaluating a plugin, what I look at is I look at the reviews and I also look at the support to see how responsive the developers are, right? Some plugins are developed once and then just abandoned, right? And you can tell that by how active the support team is at the developer.
Yeah. Speaking of, actually, you can't see, you now have to scroll all the way down to see, and there's a ton of white space on the right. So I would think you could put the contributors and developers higher up, but it also doesn't show how many plugins they have, which I guess isn't really a metric. Like it's almost worse to have 20 plugins that you don't support versus 2 that you take good care of, right? So
that's true.
Maybe that's true.
So I'm looking between 2 different versions of one of my favorite plugins that Brian wrote, which is the Write Meow plugin. And so if you go to WordPress, wordpress.org/plugin/write-meow, and then if you go to open another tab and do the exact same thing, but put in /plugins-wp, you can kind of see the comparison between those two. And you're right, Brian, that there's a ton of white space that's sitting over there on the right-hand side that could definitely be, used for, not that we're trying to fill in white space or anything like that, but, there's plenty of places that they could, go and kind of add additional stuff in there.
Exactly.
Well, the contributors used to be,
show the full description again. Could be cool.
Yeah, the contributors used to be over there in that spot.
It's at the very bottom now.
New design.
Yeah. I don't think the full description needs to be cut for sure, especially if you have a video.
I don't like how they hid everything behind a
read more.
Yeah, read more. I think contributors and developers, I think that's perfect sidebar material. I think too much they crammed into the main column. I think some stuff is good, like show screenshots right away, have the description there. FAQs. I'm used to the tab, so maybe it's just partially I like that, but I can definitely see a lot of that made it harder to discover. But I think they're putting too much in the main column.
Yeah.
So I did a search for meow instead of Write Meow.
You have competitors, Ryan.
I highly suggest that you do this because there's a Write Meow, RIGHT, as in left and right meow. But there's also one called Kitify and there's one called Cat Game.
Oh,
there's one called Apocalypse Meow.
Yes. I saw that before.
Well, let's be honest. The best named plugin out there is Kenny Login.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
My first plugin project myself, or at how all this stuff works, was I took Hello Dolly with Slayer lyrics.
Nice.
That was
There's a lot of Hello Dolly
on a competing podcast.
variations, let's
where
say.
they actually changed the I forget what I was going to say. Oh, right. Yes. They're like, oh, if you want to sneak a framework into the plugin directory, take Hello Dolly and embed your framework into it.
I got to tell you, Jason, Apocalypse Meow looks actually pretty useful. Did you look at the
It totally
details of
does.
the plugin? I mean, this is pretty nice.
It's like a lockdown plugin. It's awesome.
Yeah, I might have to check this out.
Hey, Andy, during our pre-show, you and I were talking a little bit about some of the things that are happening within this. You mentioned Jetpack earlier. Was that something that kind of related to the way that the plugin directory was being changed or has been updated?
It seemed to take, my understanding is that you can now or will be able to now soon install premium themes or some other themes through Jetpack.
Oh, okay. So it's themes.
And I think it was just themes. I don't think it was plugins. But previously, you couldn't use a plugin to install other plugins.
Yeah,
you couldn't put
sort
actually
of, like WP Touch has been doing it for a long time and stuff. But Mika actually wrote a pretty good post on that.
It was a very good post, and some of it was very enlightening. And even though I know Mika's just done a full rewrite of the plugin guidelines, what the follow-up post, the clarification, had a lot of what I thought was new information.
And just for our listeners that don't understand, you can't use a plugin to install another plugin because that's just against the rules of core.
Yeah, it's a .org rules and regulations.
But you could.
I know the answer.
Like
I know the answer. I'm just throwing you guys a song.
but correct me if I'm wrong. You can provide a list of plugins that you could install in order to be able to use, say, a particular theme or something like that, right? I mean, you could give them a list.
You can actually put in. I think you can use if your plugin requires or your theme requires certain plugins and it has to be there. You can use a framework to put up the list of what plugins that it requires or that would make it function better. But the whole idea is that these plugins and themes have functionality on their own. Otherwise, they don't want to put a crippled version up on the directory.
Right.
But your plugin or theme can have dependencies, right? You can have a checker in there that says you don't have this installed, so I can't activate.
And I've got that. Well, I have it activate, like the events calendar shortcode plugin, but it'll check, oh, do you have the calendar? No. And then show a notice and a link to actually really quickly show that like box and install it if you want really quick. So, but yeah, I can't pull it down automatically for them kind of thing.
Right.
Well, you could, but it's probably going to freak the heck out of them.
Yes. I don't want to freak the heck out of anybody. So.
I actually wrote a framework that does just that.
Freaks the heck out of everybody?
Freaks the heck out of people.
It will install something automatically.
What? Something? You don't even know what? Just it's like Russian.
Well, depends on the plugin. It'll install a plugin or a theme automatically.
Is it called I'm feeling lucky and you just
can't
installs a
activate
random one?
No. You have to specify. You have to specify the plugin or theme. I mean,
Nice.
it doesn't take a random. It just doesn't take a random plugin or theme.
It's like, let me Google that for you.
Right, exactly.
Andy, what's the name of that framework you wrote? Is that on GitHub?
It's on GitHub. It's the WP dependency installer. Is what I call
very
it.
Cool.
I gotta check it out.
Think of it as a very short version of TGMPA.
Yeah. Oh.
If I've got the letters in the right order.
I was seeing if there's a plugin in the repo called Russian Roulette that does a similar thing, but no.
I think that's a logout. Isn't that a logout plugin though?
Yeah, logout plugin.
So Steve, you were talking about earlier with the users, the way users should be looking at this. We kind of base this particular topic on both the developer side as well as the end user side. Just kind of an overview, general overview of WordPress plugins. we're talking about looking at the reviews, looking at the number of downloads, maybe even looking at how many plugins this person's actually has created. What other metrics should we be having our people take a look at here to kind of decide, is this a plugin for me and should I actually use it?
Has it been reviewed on Chris Lemma's blog? That's my first.
Oh, darn. None of mine passed that test.
I think the obvious one, the thing I look at is features, right? Does this plugin get me the general metric we use? And I know 90% of all statistics are made up, but we try to get the functionality 80% of the way there of whatever we're building. So if we're going to use a plugin versus building something custom, we want the plugin to at least do 80% of what we're trying to do.
If it's 79, like, forget it.
Absolutely, yeah. We wanted to get it close, right? And so that justifies us using the plugin versus writing something custom. And so features are important, but also UI is important, right? So if you are reviewing plugins that are similar and kind of in functionality do similar things, I highly recommend that you just do this within a sandbox, either inside a desktop server or on a staging server or somewhere that's not your production site. Install a whole bunch of plugins that are similar, activate them, review them. Just look at how their interface works, right? I know I remember there were a set of plugins that all did RSS feed ingestion into WordPress. I think they still exist. There was WPwatercooler and Feed WordPress and a couple of others. And I remember reviewing those constantly because they were always changing, right? And it really just depended on which one fit into my workflow the best. They all kind of did the same things. But that's how I don't know if it's a metric, but that's how I review plugins.
Yeah.
So if the code's totally broken, but it looks pretty,
that's fine.
Yeah,
that's all good.
It's all about looking good.
Usually, if the code looks pretty, it's probably going to work too.
Well, and let's talk about the code for a minute, right? Because I think Brian brings up a good point here. One of the other metrics that we use at Zeek is, will it scale, right? So not all plugins are created equally, and some are created for catalogs, frankly, right? For people that are just doing hobby type of projects or small business, right? But we're working on sites that do 1 million page views a day, right? And when you're at that kind of a scale, if you've got a plugin that just has something that hasn't been tested with that amount of traffic, you're asking for problems. So it's never a good idea just to turn on a plugin without reviewing whether it will scale.
Well, that's why you got to do everything in production, right? Because that's like a real test.
Absolutely,
You just activate in production.
Just hitting the nail on
crashes, you're like, oh.
For our audience,
Absolutely.
for our audience, Brian is being, what do you call it?
Sarcastic.
Yes.
There's cats in
I thought for a moment he was going to recommend, if you don't like the way it works in production, you should actually try and change it while you're there.
Yeah.
In production. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
This is the sarcastic portion of the show.
So that brings up a good point of, this code, and you should definitely review the code as well, not just plug it, not just install it locally and test it, but review what it's doing, take a look at the code. And a lot of times, like, you got to ask yourself, do you want to add this? Now you're adding another dependency which your whole system is now going to depend on. Do you want to introduce that to your code base? Is it worth it? And a lot of times what we'll find is we need a little bit of a plugin for something. We can actually just look to see what it's doing at the core, because a lot of times plugins do a lot more, especially because they have configuration options. So those configuration options add a lot of heft, which you don't necessarily need if you need it for a very specific use case. So you can bring it down into your application code, what it's doing, and then you don't have the dependency maintenance of a third party making sure that they keep their plugin up to date.
I'll give you a specific example. Aaron and I are working on a project right now as we speak for a client where we were using Gravity Forms, right? For what really is a very simple form. Now, I love Gravity Forms, right? I'm a huge Gravity Forms fan, but for what we're doing, it's bloated. It's overkill for what we need. And so it was causing a very specific issue that we just weren't expecting. And so we disabled it, and we're going to find something else.
I found some of the most the cleanest plugins that I write and out there don't have any. If I can avoid any sort of settings, I'll do it. You know, the whole decisions not options mantra.
If people looked at the
some of it
code for my
requires
plugins, I would have 0 installs. So
do one or two things and do them well, right? And like, you know, make your plugin and make those choices about what the plugin's going to do, and don't make it, you know,
Absolutely.
crazy theme fest.
Yeah, I mean,
crazy plugin fest.
the plugin I wrote for the last year's OC Plugin Palooza, embed PDF viewer. There aren't any options. You just put the URL to the PDF, and it puts it in the frame.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a notion out there, and I think I may have even said this on the water cooler before, that, you know, if you encounter a site or you inherit a site that's got a ton of plugins installed in it, you've got problems. That's not exactly true, right? More plugins doesn't necessarily equal more problems, right? You just have to find out which is the plugin that's causing the problem, or which plugins might be conflicting with each other. That can be an issue as well.
Are we going back to the cash thing? Like, more money, more problems?
But you always have that person in the back of the room at the WordCamp who raises their hand and says, "What number of plugins is too many?" And you're just like, "Well, it depends. Is it ridiculous amount of functionality that's in there? Are you installing you know, is it,
One more
are
than
you
you
putting
have.
30 copies of Visual Composer in there, or is it just, you know, are you just one with a couple of content you know, contacts or something like that?
You know, and I feel for, you know, somebody who's just coming into this space, right? That doesn't have any experience with this, right? Everybody on the water cooler right now has experience and knows sort of which plugins to avoid, and which ones are going to cause a conflict, and which ones have a lot of overhead, right? If you're just starting a WordPress site, there's a lot to know. There's a lot to learn.
Oh yeah.
I don't have any advice for you. I'm just.
There's a lot to learn. So good luck.
You know, you can hire one of us, and maybe we'll be able to guide you along the way of how to do it.
Don't install it if you don't need it, and if you're not using it, delete it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good.
Everyone needs right now, but
And if you can,
Except for Jetpack.
yeah. It's like 34 plugins in one. It's great.
Awesome, folks. Well,
Okay.
I think that's about it, right? Should we wrap up, or you got one last? You got last word, Steve?
No. I was just kind of reiterating what everybody else says. In general, you know, when you're going through the repository, or excuse me, the plugin directory, just pay attention to what other people have said, what other people have experienced, and use that as your guide, right? Something that has a ton of installs and good reviews is probably safe to use.
And going to WordCamps is a good way to, you know, you're asking around, you talk to people, and usually they'll be able to leverage their experience too. So.
Ask questions. There are plenty of people out there that can give you advice.
And
Even
hopefully
if it's
the
just on
plugin author is
Twitter.
one of them.
Exactly. All right, folks, that's about it for today. Thank you very much for being on the show and talking with us about the WordPress directory, formerly known as the repo, as we called it. And make sure you go over to our website at WPwatercooler.com. Click on the links there to subscribe. If you like this particular content, hit the little thumbs up button. I haven't been noticing that people are clicking the little thumbs up button. I think that's awesome. And if you like this particular stuff and you don't want to look at us, but you just want to listen to us, you don't want to crash in your car or anything like that, feel free to go and download the show as a podcast. You can find your podcast catcher of choice and be able to subscribe to it from there.
Why
All right,
anybody
folks.
would watch this show on video is beyond me. I don't understand that.
Well, they do. And yeah, and Andy says Overcast. That's my favorite one as well. So make sure you go check that out and get us installed. Talk to y'all later. See you next Thursday and then Friday. Bye.
Good Friday.